Hey, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. We have a fun show for this evening. The first guest is a journalist, and he writes about some things you maybe didn't realize journalists write about. And he also happens to be a former colleague of mine in college at Lehman College. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And in our second segment, the painter who did the painting that we use behind us, Danny Hauben, is going to join us and talk about all his wonderful Bronx landscapes. But let's get started with longtime journalist, Lehman College graduate, just like I am, Steve Bloom. Nice to see you. Nice to have you with us.
Excited to be with you, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right, so let's see. Since that time, and I made the list based on what you sent me, Soho Weekly News, Rolling Stone, New York Daily News, Newsday, little papers, the USA Today, New York Magazine. You were the editor of Video Games Magazine. You did all that. Did you want to write before you got to Lehman? He was the, I pulled out an old copy of the Meridian. You can barely see it. He was the editor of the Meridian, the Lehman newspaper. Were you always into journalism, or did college turn you on?
I got my start down the block at DeWitt Clinton.
There you go.
My brother was 2 years older than me, 3 years older than me. He was 2 years ahead of me in school, and he was on the newspaper when I arrived at Clinton in 1969. He was the sports editor at that time as a senior, and he encouraged me to enroll in the journalism program there, which is a class. You have to take the class to be on the newspaper and, make a commitment. I was so committed, I dropped out of like playing trumpet in the band because it took so much work to do this. And it was really new to me. I didn't have any experience writing. I was pretty young. I was only, 14, 15 years old when I was there. And so it was new. So my brother just advised me to go this direction. If he hadn't, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking with you today.
What turned or turns you on about being a writer and a journalist? What's the germ or the bacteria in there that makes it something that you have to do?
Well, it's the creative process. I mean, what I learned at Clinton and Lehman was not just writing, but editing, putting a magazine or a newspaper together. That process is a lot of fun. Starting from scratch every week, every day, every month, whatever your cycle is. It's kind of exciting just to sort of start from scratch. You have kind of a foundation of what you did the previous time, and you know what you're going to do, but you never know what the stories are going to be. And you go out there and you dig and you come up with things, and you come up with art that looks good. And at Lehman, we decided to do, these covers that were different, because I was influenced by the Village Voice and Rolling Stone growing up as a kid. And I kind of wanted Meridian to sort of be like that. Meridian was pretty staid when I got there. It was, all, kind of like bumping headlines and text on the cover, and, not really attractive. And, the Village Voice was a cover every time you saw a new cover, and then you'd turn the pages and you'd see the stories. So that's what we did at Meridian. We kind of changed things up a lot there, to make it a little more magazine-y and a little less newsy.
I'm so interested in this because I know about it for a broadcast as well. Compare, if you can, what it was like then. It's almost hard to conceive of a time where you couldn't just, share the screen and have everybody on the same page. Everything you did had to be on a piece of paper, and you'd hand it. And if you wanted a copy, you'd had to make a carbon copy. And obviously now it's totally different. What are your thoughts just about the development? Better then, better now, just totally different? What's your vision of that?
I'm happy to have experienced it. I'm old enough to have experienced the world of linotype machines, these big hulking machines.
Well, yes, I remember, right.
And they would spit out the lead with the type on it, and all that lead would get placed in pages, these heavy pages too. These guys who worked there really had like muscles to carry those pages around. They were full of lead. And then the photos were these wood boxes with like, black and white kind of coloring on. I don't know. It was odd, but it was the way they did it then. And so we learned that. But in the middle of the process of being at Meridian, there was a change towards offset printing, and we went that direction. And so we kind of got away from the old linotype machines and went in a new direction, sort of more computerized printing. It was pretty messy at the beginning. Then they started to get it together, and it got really clean and looked good. So we kind of made the switch. from the older style
Do
to
you
the newer style.
mourn? Do you mourn the fact that you had to go through all that? Whereas now, of course, you just save it as a PDF or you send it along to,
Yeah, I mean, everything
somebody.
you could just do at home now and self-publish. We used to go out to the printer. It was part of the bonding, which was a fun part of it. The Meridian team would go down to the printer every week, and we'd kind of do our job and kind of party, and then go out to some strip club next door and have a hang.
That's nice.
Whatever it was. Talking about more of that stuff happened to be a strip club right down the block from that particular
From the printer.
We're not obsessed with porn and strip clubs. It just was, the nature of New York back in those days.
1974, yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty common. They were sort of everywhere. But anyway, just the fun of being out there on our own, creating this, this issue was always a blast.
There
was such a bond between our group creating it.
It's like a school project, so to speak.
Yeah, each time.
Now, people may have noticed that he actually has rolling papers. You're the first guest I've ever had that has a rolling paper icon behind him, and Women in Weed. You were at High Times. Now, some people may not know that publication. You were at High Times. There it is. You were at High Times for 20 years. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, when you look at these covers, the top three covers are older covers before I was there, the early years of High Times in the 74 to 78 era or so, or maybe early 80s. I got to High Times in 88. So the bottom ones, the Beavis and Butthead and the Snoop Dogg, I personally did those covers. I made them happen. I acquired the Beavis and Butthead image, which was rare, and we set up that whole photo shoot with Snoop Dogg. So that was the stuff I was doing back then, which was a lot of fun.
And what I have to tell you, I knew of that publication. I never read it. What were the stories about? Were they like crazy stories for people who will hide a list?
In the 70s, High Times is a little bit like Rolling Stone, a really good quality magazine with good articles, focusing on the counterculture side of life. It was kind of like Playboy for potheads, with a centerfold and very graphic articles about, drugs around the world, mostly marijuana. And it was sort of just wide open. You had Playboy, broke the doors in the 70s and in the 50s and the 60s, and then Rolling Stone in the 60s and 70s. And kind of High Times came along with a few other, interesting publications and broke down some, some doors, in the 70s and the 80s. But, so High Times, had some really good writing. And I didn't really follow the magazine back then. Again, I'm a pothead, but I didn't really read about it. I didn't even know much about it. I remember I picked up one issue once that had a story about I did acid with Groucho Marx. It was hysterical, and I was a big fan of the Marx Brothers, so I picked that one up. But by the time I got to High Times, I had hardly read the magazine. A friend of mine was working there, brought me up to do some proofreading and some, do a couple of stories, and then they offered me a job as news editor, which was new to me.
Wow.
My background was entertainment journalism, and that was a new beat. But, as a writer, you take on beats. If you're a sports writer, maybe your beat is the Yankees, or your beat is the Giants, or whoever you're covering, football, or you switch around and move around. So that became a new beat for me, and
that became a new beat.
I dug in.
But I want to get to the current day. So now that marijuana is legal, did you ever foresee this day coming? Did you ever think, wow, maybe it would be great if it were legal? Has it changed your perception of any aspect of this culture?
Well, it was a long time coming, to achieve the change that happened here in New York in 2021 after 50 or more years. And especially New York had a period with Giuliani and Bloomberg where there were thousands and thousands of marijuana arrests, including me. I got arrested during that time.
Did you? Wow.
Yeah, there were over 50,000 marijuana arrests a year. Now they're less than 500 or even less than 200.
Well, now if you're going to get arrested, you either have to do it driving or you have a store that's
not even legal. Driving. I mean, really not even driving unless you can be proved that you're having a DUI. But you can't get arrested for walking and smoking in the streets. It's kind of hard to get arrested these days. There's no loopholes that allow arrest. Thank goodness. Now the government is trying to make some changes in that direction. That's a whole other story. But yeah, for what when we were at High Times, it was really in the worst years of the drug war. The end of the Reagan years and the beginning of the Bush years. 12 years of Republican. Just say new. High Times barely survived that period. And when I got there, the magazine wasn't in great shape. It was in debt, didn't look so good. But by 91, 92, when Clinton came in, there was a new softness around marijuana. It was okay again after the rough 80s, people were coming back around to it as, after the hard, messages of the 80s about not to do drugs and stuff. And so people came back around saying, it's not so bad. Seeing it coming, but I didn't quite see it coming the way it has. To be honest, I didn't really see the explosion of all kinds of other products that are cannabis related, drinks and stuff like that, where you have so many other options than just to sort of light a joint or smoke a bong. That's really been a big difference to me. And also the places where you go and get your marijuana these days in the new stores, they're nothing like the old head shops or the old days. They're very clean,
That's
they're very
for sure.
Apple Store-like. They're not messy like an old head shop. I kind of miss the messy head shop.
You kind of miss that interaction. Leading up to the legalization, I think maybe after it was legalized, before they had put out the stores, I'd interviewed a couple of people who had been involved in the Bronx and in establishing, the rules, et cetera, et cetera. And I asked them, what's New York City or what's the Bronx going to look like after pot is legalized? Is it going to change things for us? Is it going to look different? And they said, it's not going to look any different. Maybe you'll smell it in places that you didn't used to smell it, but the world hasn't changed as a result. That's my perception of it. I'm curious about your perception.
Well, it's changed for those of us who who use marijuana products. We used to acquire from dealers. They come to your house, you meet them on the corner, wherever it is. Maybe you put yourself in a kind of a dangerous situation where you could get arrested. So now there's stores, and now it's dramatically changed. For the Bronx, it's kind of a slow rollout. There are only 15 of these new stores in the Bronx, whereas there are 45 in Manhattan. So it's a little slow. Up here in Riverdale, we don't have a store really up the hill. There's one down the hill on Kingsbridge Avenue called Frass Box. That's the only one in the neighborhood. So they're slow to move it up into Northwest Bronx. Right now, there are 325 dispensaries, legal dispensaries, not including medical, around the state. And out of that, there are 130 in New York. So 40% of the stores that you see, now are based in New York City. So that's kind of a boom for the city, especially around Manhattan. So many.
We're almost out of time. Real quick, Steve, people can find you on the web, right? You have a website.
Well, celebstoner.com is my website. Patreon, and if you go to the Celebstoner, Patreon, you can read my newsletter, and Facebook and social media under Celebstoner or my name are very, I'm all over the place.
Steve, I'm so glad we reconnected, and I really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us in the Bronx Buzz.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. See you in the neighborhood.
Oh, for sure. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, what are the best artists in the Bronx? Don't go away.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. You know, I always say I'm excited when I have my friends on the show, and this friend is as talented an artist as has ever been in the borough of the Bronx. My buddy Danny Hauben. Nice to see you, Dan.
Nice to see you, Gary. Thanks for having me back. You know, we were young whippersnappers once upon a time. So I was hoping maybe you could use AI and use like the images of me, you know, whatever it was, 30 years ago, and have the current interview.
Yeah, and so I could make you look much younger than you actually are. But one of the things Danny really likes about the Bronx Buzz is that this is his painting behind us. Just, I don't know if I've ever asked you this. I probably did. When did you start painting, and what drove you? What motivated you to become a painter? And now that it's, you know, aside from your personal life, it's your life.
Yeah, no, who knows? I mean, I was just not drawn to the kind of competitive stuff that you know my friends were doing, sports and all this other stuff. And I had an influence of an older brother who was you know, he went to music and art, and he went to Cooper Union, and so I was exposed to his doing his thing, and his artist friends and musician friends, and so I just, you know, I kind of found some kind of connection with making art at a pretty young age. You know, my father he was in the shipping department of his company, and one day he brought home like a big roll of white paper from one of the machines, and we made a scroll out of it. And
how old were you?
I was like 7, 8, I don't know. And then I got very excited to unroll it and then bug all my siblings and my friends to do doodles, you know, and then it became this thing. I don't know whatever happened to it, but
I was going to say the first Danny Hauben mural.
Yeah,
that was pretty
so my
significant.
parents were indulgent. You know, I had you know, my oldest brothers were kind of like brainiac overachiever types, and they fulfilled my parents' need for, like, you know,
for a doctor and a lawyer.
Successful, you know, one's an engineer, one was a physicist, whatever. And so, you know, and then the motto of all my siblings, who were quite a bit older than me, was, you know, let him do his thing. So
and at some point you said the Bronx is as good a tableau, is as good a place to work. Talk about the borough of the Bronx, and you know why it drives you, and why, you know, you've just frankly become in love with the tales of the way it looks.
Well, you know, I guess I sought to challenge myself to capture the world around me. And what did I find? I found the Bronx.
The borough of the Bronx.
The views of the, you know, so I grew up in the north east corner of the Bronx Boston Road and Eastchester Road, and you know, it wasn't the kind of vista that I came upon when we moved when I was 9 years old. But before that, it was kind of, you know, you heard the sounds of kids playing hopscotch or ring-a-levio, whatever, outside the window, and we had access to the courtyards and the rooftops and whatever. Right. And so I was always exploring. I enjoyed that world. So I did my first cityscape when I was 8 years old, because my parents knew we were moving, so they let me do a mural on the wall in our apartment.
It didn't matter. Wow.
And I shared the room with my brother Eddie, and we had 2 beds coming out from that wall. So I did like whatever I could think of, the quintessential cityscape of build. I remember bugging my brother, how do you make a window? How do you draw a window? He said, oh, you make an L. So I made all these L's. I had all these windows, and my friends and I would put on towels and jump from bed to bed, pretending we were Superman flying through the city.
Flying through the city, because you had created the city.
Yeah, we never got a photo of that, unfortunately, either. But you know, in those days, it was it was just, I don't know. And, you know, luckily my parents allowed me to do such a thing. And I took advantage. I enjoyed it.
And here we are now. So let's
Yeah.
see. You've got the library at Bronx Community College, which is just spectacular. You have your work displayed permanently there. You have done stained glass over at what is it? The Westchester Square,
Freeman Station,
the Freeman Station on what is the number
2 and
5?
5 line.
2 and 5 line. And you know, you've won a million Brio awards. Somebody said we're gonna rename it the Danny Hauben Award. And goodness, you painted so many things. 2 of your paintings are in my bedroom. Your paintings are used here. I'm tempted to say what's next, or maybe let's show some pictures and then you'll tell us what's next.
Well, we'll have to do a next episode because I'm in this. You know, we're leading up to the second. What is it? The 2nd of April when I'm giving a.
Where you're going to be at Amalgamated Housing.
Yeah, it's presented by the Bronx County Historical Society, which I'm excited, and that will be, you know, just the history of drawing and painting Riverdale and Kingsbridge since I moved here in 1965.
So let's start showing some stuff before we run out of time. Let's see what we got here. Here we go, and this looks like
this is a little bit of a blurry image because I don't know where this piece is or how I photographed it, but this was so I used to do all my artwork, you know, when I was in my mid-teens in those blank books, you know, with the black covers.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's whatever it is, 9 by 11, but something. And so that was one page from the book. And it's done in magic marker.
It's 234th Street, and where the Pancake House
the little
was.
House of Pancakes, and that's actually the building of the Century Building, the construction. If you see the cranes on top of that,
all the way up the hill.
And Staples used to be Waldbaum's. But
you know, I saw that it said Waldbaum's there, and I was trying to remember, but I didn't. What the Staples on 234th?
It was a supermarket, and that piece led to my first cityscape painting, which I did. So I did that when I was 16.
Wow!
And then
Amazing.
when I was 20, I was 19. I was living in the Boston area, and my first big painting was based on that
original
marker drawing. So maybe I missed the Bronx. I don't know.
Well, that's all right. Go ahead. Let's keep it going. We got a couple more
up here anyway. So yeah, I try to. You know, they kind of tell the story. So I spent sometimes I go out looking for exotic subject matter or landscapes, and other times I try to stop and see what I pass every day right in my neighborhood. So right down from my building, if you go down Bailey Place to Bailey Avenue, is the handball court.
I was wondering where that is. Now I know where it is. Yes.
Yeah. And
so that's Bailey Avenue behind you.
That's correct. So behind us is the Major Deegan. And to our right is 234th Street. And if you go up the hill past these buildings, it's Fort Independence Street where I live. So I became, spent a whole summer at the Bailey handball courts, hanging with the handball guys.
Do you like painting buildings more than you like painting, images, people like that, or it doesn't matter, whatever the scene is you have?
Well, it's a good question. My first 10 years of cityscapes were without people, and then when I try to include people, my people looked like they were made out of the same bricks and mortar that the buildings were. And it took a while to loosen up because people are moving, people are
different,
all these different shapes. But it actually really changed everything because I loosened up, to capture.
And you even captured some of the motion there. Let's go, next one.
Exactly. So what do we got?
And here we go.
We're just talking about this is the looking Sedgwick Avenue.
North on Sedgwick Avenue.
North, kind of east, and then and to the right is the reservoir. The towers, Amalgamated Towers, are on the left. Then on the right, you see the Clinton High School. So this was my friend Howard, who got an apartment with this view, and this was obviously a winter scene. So this is pastel and charcoal.
And was this before Tracy Towers, or that was the beginning?
No, I think somehow it wasn't quite in the trajectory. I'm not sure.
And why black and white? Because it was winter and you felt that?
Winter. I don't know. Who knows?
All right. Don't ask. And
next, artists come up with these goofy answers to everything, but they don't really know what they're talking about.
This was when there were trees on the right side of the path of Thornton Independence Park.
What we call Pigeon Park.
Right.
Where as a kid, I spent a lot of time in this park, and this is also looking in the same direction, actually up.
That one,
to the east. But now you're at ground level, and isn't this cool? This is a pastel. I had like a whole crowd of children
hanging around you. I think you sent us one more that I wanted to show, and then and this one.
So this is the most popular because I also my wife makes prints of my work, and this is the most popular print of this looking down 238th Street steps. So we are up in Riverdale. We're coming down the steps towards the 238th Street station.
That's right.
So,
I can, as far as the print goes, if I could stand up with my laptop, I could show you it's hanging probably about 8 feet from me right now, a print of that. Cool. So Danny, let's put up the amalgamated poster. You're going to be there and talking about what?
So I did a different, earlier version of this talk at the Edge Hill, what used to be the Edge Hill Church, with the Kingsbridge Historical Society, and when we talked about what shall I show, at first I was like, okay, well, I'll just show work from Riverdale and Kingsbridge since I arrived in 1965. Then I'm like worried, am I going to find enough images? Well, I've had to edit because I found almost 200 pieces that I've done over the years.
That's April 2nd. Danny, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're going to run out of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Gary.
April 2nd. And what time do you remember?
7, I believe.
7 p.m.
Glad to call. Come early. Should be a full house. And thank you so much.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for giving us good new visions of our hometown. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
All right. Folks, that'll do it for the Bronx Buzz. We thank Steve. We thank Danny. We thank the people of the Bronx. And if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we will be back next week. Good night.